Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today, we're here with Regina Roberti, and she's calling all the way from Florida, hopefully sunnier than here in England. And she's going to talk to us about insomnia, the lack of sleep that is affecting a large part of our population. In and out, maybe half of the time. And for some people, that's been the same for years. And sometimes there are physical reasons, sometimes there are emotional reasons. So let's dive in with Regina and see what happens when we cannot sleep. What are the symptoms that your clients come to you and complain about?
So the biggest symptoms are like um, brain fog, anxiety, depression. They are not doing really well as far as coping skills, communicating with their families. They feel like they can't function in life, and the lack of sleep is really taken over. And there's a lot of fear around health conditions that can come up when dealing with insomnia for long periods of time. Some people have more of a resilient personality where they're like, I know I have this problem and I really would love to get rid of it. And they cope with it well and they learn how to work around it. But there are other people that the fact that they're not sleeping consumes their whole experience and tends to be detrimental to their quality of life.
I can quite see that because you don't wake up feeling well, you're not rested. So it's terrible. So it can, with not just the symptoms, but the consequences of not sleeping are quite large. Just imagine, like a new mom had maybe two babies in nappies or diapers, it's the same mistake, and she can't quite sleep. Then during the day, she has a school run. She's never catching up with resting, and then she might be snappy. When she goes to bed, she get waking up again. I mean, wow. So that is a terrible thing. It isn't just the circumstances of life sometimes. Could they be that a lot of your clients come because they have not just the sleep problem, but now they have problem with a relationship because they can't sleep?
Yeah, there's this domino effect of how it affects people's lives. It kind of starts off with the mood, right? The being snappy, the attitude, the being very impatient with whatever's happening in their life. And then that will affect their communication skills with their children or with their family members or with their spouses or partners. And then, you can only be so self-controlled after a certain amount of not sleeping when you go to work. So you can become very forgetful. Your cognitive skills start to suffer. You're not remembering things. And that, starts at home where like, oh, I forgot to do this or I forgot to do that. And then that's frustrating because then you start beating yourself up about it. But then when you start to forget key things that you have to do at work, it starts to affect your performance. And that puts a lot more pressure on you to really want sleep. And it becomes this weird cycle or loop of thought where I'm never going to get sleep. I really need sleep. I want sleep, but I can't fall asleep, or I fall asleep, I can't stay asleep. And it's this loop that just kind of takes over and becomes like the mantra of this unfortunate and negative experience.
Okay, thank you. I just want to go a little bit deeper on this. So could it be that because we have experienced the lack of sleep, that we now tell ourselves every night when we go to sleep, oh, here we are again, I'm going to be awake half of the night, and we are somehow priming our mind for not sleeping?
Yeah, it's really funny because the more we focus on something that's negative, the more of that negativity we tend to get. And so I have noticed that um, that a lot of the clients that I have that kind of, what do you call it? It's just like a habit of thought that they get stuck in. And so when they constantly tell themselves, I can't sleep, I can't fall asleep, they're actually creating that experience. But what's really interesting is every client that I've worked with, even though they get themselves stuck in that headspace where they're creating what they're worried about or stressing about, but it's never the actual problem. The not sleep is not the problem. There's a lot of people in the world that function without sleep, but it's what they're telling themselves that is creating the comfort in the discomfort, or the discomfort just in the experience altogether. But when I've worked with my clients, it's never really been about the sleep. The sleep is like a symptom of something bigger going underneath the surface. And so when somebody's constantly self-talking about the lack of sleep, it's just where they're stuck. It's not actually where the solution lies. You're not going to fix the problem from that place, because there's so much attention on the issue that's coming up, which is what feels like the lack of sleep, because it affects you in so many different ways, because you're tired.
I see. So when the client comes to you, he comes with a variety of symptoms. So where do you start working? Because we're trying to give a little bit of hope to those who think, well, I can never sleep properly, or I wake up at 3 a.m. and that's the end every single night. So how do you work around these issues? So you don't start with sleep. Where do you start?
No, we do. We start with the problem. So what do you think the problem is? Like, explain to me why you believe that you have the sleep issue, right? So the more that they go into that trying to explain where the sleep issue comes from, the deeper we can dig, because every time something that they say comes up, we can explore that and see if it's just a conscious belief or if it's an unconscious belief. We're looking for unconscious information. Conscious information is not the information that we can solve any problems with. It's the unconscious information that actually has the solution, but it's buried. And so the more unconscious information that I can key into, the further down the trail we get to go, and the further we get to go, the more likely we'll be able to find the root cause of why the sleep is a problem.
That makes sense. Thank you. So let me understand. So do you think that there is some mechanism in our habits or in our habit of thinking that can be behind the lack of ability to fall asleep or to remain asleep for 6 to 8 hours a night?
I think it can be a lot of things. It's a very individualized scenario. If I talk about 3 different clients, one was an irrational fear that led to the need to control, and that led to 35 plus years of insomnia. It put her through school, medical school. It helped her start a business, not sleeping. So the upside was the fact that she could function on very little sleep. And she had a very positive, outgoing look at what she could do versus what wasn't happening. With another client who worked in also a medical system, there was this really strange pattern of thought around numbers. So she had this belief that things had to be a certain way. It was really strange, the connection of all the things. But there were all these numbers, like I have to sleep this many hours, my weight has to be within this range, I have to work this many hours. And it was all of these things that became like an OCD within, of everything has to be just so. And then with another person who was struggling with sleep, there was a lot of childhood trauma and noise. There was this fear of thinking. There was this inability to sit with their own emotions. And so they needed noise to crowd those thoughts out. And so every night that she went to sleep, she couldn't go to bed unless there was noise, because if she sat there, she didn't want to deal with the silence, which would lead her to all these other emotions that would bubble up. And so there was this self-protection going on in that scenario. So everybody's completely different when it comes to their problems.
Right. So there isn't a one size fits all protocol, but you
Mhm.
really want to go through. So it might take quite a few sessions, do you think, to help a person to sleep or manage better?
Well, in my line of work of doing advanced conversational hypnosis, when you first start out, you might, doing this modality, you might have to do 2 or 3 sessions, but I haven't, I've gotten so good at spotting those unconscious beliefs and finding those breadcrumbs to lead me to that root cause with the client that my clients get sleep after 1 session. And that could be anywhere from, I think my shortest session was 46 minutes, and my longest session was about an hour and 40. And so they were sleeping that night or gradually increasing sleep over the next couple of weeks to where they no longer have that falling asleep or staying asleep issue.
That's an amazing result. Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
It's incredible. And what a relief after all these years of or months of issues to be able to actually sleep. And I remember watching some Huberman Lab episodes about sleep. And he was saying you cannot catch up with sleep because you cannot live in the past. So once you lost it, you lost that night of sleep is gone. You can't just say, oh, I haven't slept last night because of a problem. So now I'm going to sleep. And yeah, you might feel better after, but the processes that have not happened in that night will not happen in the afternoon, which is why he was suggesting shift workers be very careful, etc. But one very important thing is most people don't realize, and that's why we get nervous about lack of sleep. It isn't quite the number of hours, but the quality of sleep and how regular and constant this sleep is. It's according to the Superman guys and neuroscientists. So if the sleep is of good quality and we are rested and it's regular, so if we go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, we're not disrupting the rhythm, then we get a lot more out of our sleep. But if you keep saying, oh yeah, tonight disco, tomorrow this, tomorrow, and we keep changing that, then the body doesn't have this message that that's the time when I go to sleep. And so, our levels of melatonin and also our preparation can make it more difficult because nothing is there in our physiology to help us to wind
Mm.
down and finally go to sleep. So I just wonder if that has been also your experience.
Actually, no. I think through exploring people's problems on the medical level, we miss a lot of the emotional. And I think emotional is such a huge component, a major player in the fact that somebody can't get to sleep. And so I don't know, like I said, it's an individuation, right? A process of individualizing the client's specific issue on why they can't sleep, which is why they have such successful outcomes, is because at some point in their life, whether it started in childhood or it started in when they were a teen, or if it started later in life, depending on some kind of event or scenario that happened, beliefs can form very young, or they can form at any point in our lives, depending on what our situation is. Now, I would say lifestyle as a certified health coach definitely can play a role in the quality of sleep that somebody gets. Medications can cause insomnia if you're on pharmaceuticals, like a number of them. They can cross interact, and a lot of doctors don't consider that when they're writing scripts, many scripts for one person for many issues. What you're eating or what you're not eating can play a role in that as well. If you're somebody who lives a sedentary life and you're not exercising regularly, there are a lot of issues with stagnation that can happen in the body. If you're somebody that sits inside from morning until night, you don't get any sunlight in your eyes, which is where the circadian rhythm is stimulated, where the melatonin and the serotonin production and all the hormones that work together to set that circadian rhythm can be formed in a healthy way, then, yes, these things can all play their role. But every single client, even one that thought that her issue was menopause, didn't actually turn out to be the physiological aspect of what her body was going through. It turned out to be this subconscious issue. And so her conclusion was, well, I'm this old, it must be this. but it had nothing to do with that. And that's where I think we get ourselves into a lot of trouble with our labels, with our diagnoses for any condition, not just insomnia. I think when we're trying to consciously figure out what our problem is, we create more issues for ourselves, which are what we call in ACH knots or layers or conclusions or beliefs. And so in ACH, it's such a beautiful process because through the questioning process, we get to uncover each layer by layer by layer, and we're unearthing a bunch of mini problems, which leads us eventually to the biggest one, which is that core belief or what we call root cause. And so there's so many different layers it could be. Yes, there could be some external things going on or physiological things going on, but I think the emotional, in my experience working with hundreds of clients, is that the emotional tends to take the front seat on the lack of sleep.
Incredible. So, guys, it isn't just the lack of sunshine, there's a lot more here, So, this emotion had to come out. So, let's pretend that a person is watching this episode and they can't really sleep well normally, and they want to take action today. And, but they don't know what to do. What's the first thing? Because they tried everything. What would be your tip?
Well, it's so hard because I see this all the time. When you tell somebody just relax, just go meditate, just go, try to find a place to be calm so that your body can relax, they've already tried that. They've already tried the melatonin. They've already, over the counter. They've already tried changing their diet or eliminating caffeine or not drinking alcohol. They've already tried all of those things. Well, if you've tried all of those things, but you haven't been able to, some people are really lucky. Those things will work for them. Even if it's temporary, it's enough to feel good for a little while. But there's a mindset shift that has to happen around the sleep in itself, which is very hard to do when you're caught in a negative spiral about not sleeping. So my first suggestion is always to find a way to be okay with the lack of sleep right now, knowing that it doesn't have to be a permanent situation. If you can somehow talk yourself into believing that, which I know is a difficult scenario, you can actually let go of that negative looping thought around not sleeping, where your body might go, okay, she's not stressing out about this, or he's not stressing out about this, and I might let them sleep tonight. But if any of those other things like meditation work, even if temporary, that's a great thing. A little sleep is better than no sleep at all. But if you haven't yet found somebody to work with that does do subconscious work to this degree, where you're the one who is leading the session versus somebody else showing you the way, because this is your problem. You've created it at some point in your life. I know that's hard to hear, but you're the one who has to be able to solve it. You just need somebody who can guide you there. And so find somebody in the sleep world who's a professional, an expert, a specialist that can help guide you into that unconscious, because that is going to be where you get the permanent results. And it's not the person fixing it, it's you fixing it. And I think that's why ACH has been so successful for me, because my clients are the ones who have created the problem. They've gone in their subconscious. They found that resource that isn't necessarily a good one. And now that's their resource, right? But if you got that resource from subconscious, now you can go back in and find a new one. But it has to be your choice. If you've ever been told to do something and automatically you get this inner resistance, like, I don't want to do that, or I can't do that. That's what's going to happen when you're working with somebody who is trying to fix your problem. You have to fix your own problem. And that's my ultimate advice when you're dealing with sleep conditions, is because, it impacts your life in so many ways if you're not going that deep. If you're just treating things on a superficial or a symptom-based level, it's going to be very hard to remove that issue permanently where it doesn't come back.
I see. So that's a very good observation, because I had a few episodes about sleep and everyone had their own view and what you can do. There are physiological ways, there are herbs, there are teas, there are medications, there are all sorts of approaches. But if nothing is working and you have not talked about what's going on deep down here, what is the little chatter in the mind? I do call it a negative committee. When you go to sleep and you're thinking the whole time of all the plans and things that have to happen or things that have happened, and they're worrying you a little bit about concern, about planning that you're doing. And you're like, now I have to sleep. And it's not happening. You're sitting there or laying there thinking, oh, I'm not sleeping. And then you get agitated. So that's good to know that actually the emotional part is such a fundamental part of sleep, isn't it? Because sleep is when we lose the consciousness and we go unconscious. So surely the conscious mind have a lot to do with this aspect of our life. Very good.
Yeah, what's really interesting is when we go to sleep, when our eyes are shut and we're in that REM state and we go into those theta alpha waves and we're sleeping, right? We are still awake subconsciously. And that is the time of day that we actually process all of the things that happened in the day. But if your conscious mind is so busy because your unconscious mind wants to keep you awake because it's keeping you from dealing with those painful thoughts of whether it was past trauma or current stuff like stress that's going on, you actually can't go into sleep to actually clear anything. You can't go in and do that processing work, which is where a lot of problems get solved, which is when you're sleeping. And so while you're up and you're consciously trying to fix all these issues because you've stressed out so much, your brain is just taken over, there's this huge disconnect between where we heal, which is not just physiologically from our day, right? I say to my kids all the time, when you go to sleep, your body can heal faster. So close your eyes and go to bed. A person who can't sleep cannot heal that way, but they also, not appropriately anyways, but they also can't do the processing that their brain needs to do to help organize all of the things in the day. And so that can create a lot of mental chaos, which is where like anxiety and depression tends to come into play after long bouts of not sleeping. It's a really interesting topic.
It is. I mean, wow, we could be going forever about this. And, you hear a lot because people are, I'm in menopause, so I cannot sleep. Well, not everyone in menopause cannot sleep. So what is happening in your life that is different? And there is something in the past. You were going to say something. Tell me.
No, I was just, that's 100%. Like if there are other women out there with menopause, perimenopause, and they can sleep, then the sleep is not the issue. Right? It has to be something else. And you're 1,000% on top of it. It has to be something else with you. There's something else. The not sleeping is a conclusion. And I know that that's very hard to hear, but that just goes to show you that this is a very individualized person to person, case by case scenario. And it has to be treated that way whenever you're working with somebody who can't sleep.
So I remember there's a person years ago, a person in my life, and she's lovely, but there were periods in her life where things were not happy and sleep was so hard to come. And so the doctor gave her a sleeping pill. And so after a period, this person said, well, I don't really want to take them anymore because it's making my life more difficult. Because see, the problems were still untouched. And now this pill would throw you out completely. And many years later, when she was back to some problem, she was like, oh, I can't sleep, I have this problem. And she would take the sleeping pill again, but the problem keeps coming back. And you always think, you can throw all this sand on this, but the problem is there and it's coming out in the night when you're trying to sleep, and the body's like, can we get these cells freed of all these past memories? Sometimes trauma, sometimes just feeling uncomfortable, rejected, unloved, not enough. We're always having flashbacks, don't we, of our life. And a little episode that happened when we were 7 and we thought we were really ugly. The teacher told us we were not clever enough. And they come back and we wonder why. Sometimes they come back just like that. Sometimes the mind is telling us, can we process this now? And you remember it. And if you allow yourself maybe to meditate into it, you might be able to sleep. But if you're just worried and anxious and your negative stuff, I'm quite sure it's like trying to jump. When you're trying to sleep, you're trying to go up into the clouds and fly, right? But you can't jump because you have this, visualize this, and 2 big magnets attached to your feet. And you're trying to go up, but you can't because they're keeping you down. And when you're trying to sleep, you have to let go. And the way to let go is not to say, now I'm going to sleep. Is I'm going to
No.
let go. You have to let go. So isn't the secret sauce then, Regina, for sleeping to actually let go of this past that is hindering us? So sleep and letting go, are
Yes.
they one thing that goes together?
When you go to the unconscious and you can change the meaning of the original core belief, you can let go. But it's not as easy as saying, oh, I just need to let this go, because that core belief is some type of survival or safety program that was put into place at some point where it was very necessary for survival. And as you got older, you had all these experiences and you were looking for evidence that that belief was true. And when you look for it, you're going to find it. And so you've compounded through those new experiences this belief, and you've layered it and layered it and layered it like sediment rock. And it's just compounded. And it's all these different layers of beliefs that go, see, this happened. That makes what I think true.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, if you haven't been sleeping since you were an infant, what was going on when you were an infant that made you think that you needed to stay awake? But to go back to that issue is a painful experience emotionally. You might not remember it because it was so long ago, but now you want to poke at that memory. The subconscious mind is going to go, hold on, I'm not doing this. I'm not dealing with this. I'm not going anywhere near that. It kept me safe for this long. It's made my life what it is. It might not be perfect, but you want to know, I'm so happy keeping that experience a secret, because if you touch that, then I'm going to have to deal with some emotional pain that I don't want to go near. And so when certain modalities, different therapies that are out there, when you start looking at the problem and trying to fix the problem, which is a symptom, not the actual problem, the resistance goes up. The subconscious mind goes, stop right there. I'm not doing this. You can keep trying to fix that, but that's not what the real problem is, and I'm not letting you come any closer. And so that's why problems last for so long with certain modalities, with certain therapies, because it's all symptom hunting. You're running around, you're spinning around the symptom. So now you're like, oh, I got some clarity, I'm great. And then something happens in life and it's a new experience that still compounds that old belief, and now it comes up again. And so it's like you said earlier, it's this cycle of experiences where you fix it temporarily, but now all of a sudden you didn't actually fix the real thing. So now it's showing up again somewhere else. It's getting louder, it's getting bigger, it's causing more symptoms, it's causing more illnesses, it's causing more chaotic life experiences. And so if you don't address those core beliefs that created this issue and you don't try to make sense of them emotionally, then unfortunately for a lot of people, it takes a very long time to get to the point where they get the help they need.
Well, guys, that was quite an explanation, and this is why we are often stuck in these beliefs that go round and round like in a washing machine, in a spin, go round and round and round, but we're not able to escape, so we need something to come out, and that's where the especially comes in, because guys, that's what we do all day. They can see the pattern, and we really cannot see the problem. I mean, really, if you are, any job, if you're a dentist, you don't work on your teeth, you get somebody else, and you don't analyze yourself as a psychiatrist. So you need somebody else to look there, because we do not see, we have a bias, don't we? You're like, I cannot let go of this. It's terrible. And it's not something to be worried about, because that's how the human mind works. We can only see our point of view. And also the memory, what is important, I always learn from my little psychotherapy training, is like the memory of an event is the perception of a memory of event, because the event, if recorded by 10 different people, will have 10 different versions. So it's how you perceived it. Let's say if you pee yourself and you're 5 and the whole class is looking at you and they laugh, you're going to feel completely different compared to a 20-year-old who has like a completely different, oh yeah, this happened, there was an accident, it's a completely different mindset and maturity and wisdom and ability to laugh at yourself, whatever. There was a bad example I made, but it's just
No, it's
different.
good.
The outtake of life is different, isn't it? When you are excluded from a group and you can't go in as a 5-year-old, it could be the only thing you can do. But when you're older, you say, all right, I'm excluded from those, I'm going to create my own group. So it is different. And then the memories change. And how do I know? And we're going to close now. Because many times I talk to my brother or to some of my relatives and say, how about that event happened when I was 10-year-old and this happened and that happened, or people that were at school with me 30 years ago in Italy, now you know my age. And they're like, well, actually what happened was different, was da-da-da-da. And I hear a slightly different story from what I remember. I'm like, how come that I absolutely remember this? And they say, no, it wasn't like that. I even put sometimes the wrong person in the memory. And my brother might say, there was no grandma, there was grandfather that did that. I'm like, really? And so we sometimes have a whole castle built on this paper cards that have all wrong memories or memories that we change and we embellish, we make it worse, we make it bigger or darker. And because we're attached to that, we think that's it. And then we can let this go. And the good news is that this is very, very possible. Sometimes with just a single session with life transformation solutions. So talking to Regina today, but with ACH. So conversational hypnosis is the way to go through and get those subconscious little beliefs and just obliterate them and just go straight to the end and see why, and then being able to actually sleep and enjoy that. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a pretty incredible experience. I've got my own issues that I work on personally, and to see, the work that gets done in a session from the client perspective has also been really rewarding. But just to see somebody who's been suffering 10, 20, 30 years with insomnia go to sleeping and not waking up in the middle of the night, or if they do to pee, they lay back down, they go to sleep immediately, nothing's keeping them awake, and the quality of life changes. And what's the best amazing thing is, because we're doing all of those mini sessions within a session, you're getting multiple outcomes. Not just the issue is changing, that symptom that you came to me with, but now all these other things that were also affected by that root cause, that core belief, are now starting to shift as well. And that's why my business is called Life Transformation Solutions, because each session can shift you in 5 or 6 different ways, not just that one place.
It's more.
So it's such a wonderful modality. I've been so happy with it.
It's amazing. And I'm sorry, we only have 1 minute left to Zoom. So we have to close the meeting here with all this excitement, knowing that we can go to the very bottom of a problem and finally sleep today and every time. So thank you so much for being with us, Regina. I hope that you guys want to connect with her, ask her any question, and they will put links and everything. So thank you so much for being with us. Enjoy, click, share, and subscribe, and visit our website, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.